Hello, interactive art designers. Today's topic is rollovers or mouseovers. And there's three types that we're going to look at today. Two that are JavaScript based, which means in Dreamweaver, use a window called behaviors, and the behaviors applies to JavaScript for you. So we'll do the swap image and the swap image disjointed rollover using this behaviors window. And then we're also going to look at using filters to do a CSS based rollover where we just change the hover using a different filter value so that the button changes and gives the user some good feedback. Okay, so you can pause this and you can read what I've written there if you want. But I will show you, first of all. We'll jump to Google Chrome. And what's happening here is the disjointed rollover. All right, this is disjointed rollover because the area that I'm rolling over, this little thumbnail, isn't changing, but this area is. This picture, which is a picture of the Clash bassist smashing his bass guitar, is the image that's actually changing when I roll over these. So it's swapping out that image with something else. That is called a disjointed rollover. If the image itself swaps out with something else, that's just called a rollover or a mouseover, which is very traditional. Okay, for your homework, you're going to go ahead and add the 4 disjointed rollovers for these so that minor thread and jawbreaker, their bands will appear up here. And we're also going to do a standard swap image mouseover where we swap out the minor thread button. And we're going to add some CSS-based rollovers to these 3. All right, and those are actually the easiest thing and cleanest in terms of code. Okay, so Dreamweaver. I've already got this basically set up for y'all. It's pretty simple. I just have this big content div with an image at the top, big image at the top, and then a bunch of thumbnails. Each one of those is nested in this class I called CD div, which just gives it a width. It doesn't give it a height, it just gives it a width. And it formats the type that goes in there so that the type is white and that sort of thing. So every one of these, in case you don't know what, maybe that type's too small, you'll know that's against me. So just for your help. The same CD div class is used for all 8 of these. So every one of these images resides in this CD div and has all the exact same properties. All right, so they all flow to the left, so they all stack up one next to the other until they hit the end of this space right here. Okay, so that's the setup. Let's go ahead and make some changes. Let's start with minor threat. Now, before we start with minor threat, there's one thing that we should do to do a little prep work. It's going to bring up a dialog box that lists the IDs of all the images, and I have not ID'd all these images yet. I've ID'd these images. If I go to Window, Properties, you can see this one has an ID of LTJ thumb, which stands for less than J thumb in my head. And this one has an ID of against, I put a long name in there, as long as I can recognize it. But minor threat doesn't. So I'm going to call this like MT MO for minor threat. No, I'll put minor threat thumb. And this one, jawbreak. Oh, I already titled that one. This one, sublime thumb. Okay, these are IDs, so I could do camel case and stuff. And notice it's a little slow to catch up sometimes. Okay, so I recognize the titles now, they're IDs. And they're all in there. Again, I gotta sometimes click on it twice for it to switch. But I've double checked that all my properties, they're all ID'd in my properties inspector, all right? All that does in your code is simply put in an ID for them. So when you give them a name, and sometimes in Dreamweaver, even though it'll actually put a name in, and let's see the ones we just did, it did put an actual ID in there. Okay. So, and a name. It put in both for us. So cool. Double lucky, I guess. All right, so let's go ahead and do the first. We'll start with the basic, which is a swap image, where the thumbnail swaps out with another thumbnail. The important rule here is that they have to be the same size. So this is 115 pixels by 115 pixels, as you can see in here. And I have another image that's exactly the same size. I used the crop tool, set it to 115 pixels, and cropped out exactly what I wanted to get the size I wanted. All right, so otherwise things are going to go really weird in the space because everything's tightly aligned in columns and grids and that sort of thing. You know, the whole design is based on this alignment. Okay, so to do this, you are going to have to, first of all, put it in design view. If you go up here and this is grayed out because this is what we need, behaviors, it's because you're not in design view. So design view, and then you can go to behaviors. Okay, so behaviors is the panel we need. And let's go ahead and make sure we have the right button here. Because I was clicking around. So yes, minor threat. I hit the little plus and go down to swap image. And you can see why I titled them. So it'll say that's my minor threat thumbnail that I have selected. Just to confirm what I already know. But you know, it's nice to see it visually. And then it's asking me, what image do I want? So let's make sure I'm on my desktop in my local file folder, and I am. So I want my minor threat thumbnail rollover. So this yellow one is my original that I have on the screen now. This is the one that I want to swap. All right, so I have the swap. The set source is the image that's going to be swapped out. And then I say, okay. Now you see I have two scripts attached to this. One that swaps the image and then one sets it back to the original after I mouse out. And we'll try that in a minute, but you'll see it's pretty straightforward and it works pretty well. I can change these if I want. If I click on them, there's a little drop down. I could pick different handlers. But this is the most typical for this swap image, is to do it on mouseover. Okay. We'll leave this up here and we will try this. I'll have to save it. And jump over here. And there it is. It takes one image out and puts in another. If I was to click and drag this, you can see that's the exact same size image. Oops. I can't click and drag the other one because as soon as I roll over it, or mouse over it, it swaps. Okay. Notice I haven't done the disjointed rollover with this yet, but I can. What I would probably do is do on the mouse over, have it swap this thumbnail, and then on click, I'd have it swap this. So it would be a separate action. But we'll go to the next button for the disjointed rollover. Okay, Dreamweaver. So the disjointed rollover, pretty much the same. And by the way, notice when I can always change my mind. Once I click back on the image, if I have this panel open, it'll show me the scripts I have attached to it so I can delete them or do whatever. All right, let's do another one. This time we'll do the disjointed swap image. So I'll do swap image. And this time, it thinks I want to do something to swap out the jawbreaker thumbnail, but I don't. Remember, I want to swap out this image now. So that one I called big image. It's at the top. This is the first thing in my list. So big image is the one I'm going to swap. And then I tell it what I want to swap in there. And I want it to do jawbreaker because that's my big jawbreaker picture is 500 by 300. So it's taking one 500 by 300 pixel image and swapping it out with another one of the exact same size. And I'm going to keep these things checked by default and say OK. And again, if I wanted to make this on click, I could switch it right here. Instead of mouse over, I could say on click. I'm going to keep these all mouse over for now. Okay. And you can always hit the minus if you want to get rid of them again. So let's try it out. Make sure this works. Google Chrome, save. And there we go. Let's go ahead and do a Sublime and a Descendants disjointed rollover. Those are easy enough. Those are quick. Now that we know what's going on here. So here's Sublime. Swap image. I want to swap out the big image, which is the one at the top here, with my Sublime 300 by 500. The very bottom, I'll do dog. Say okay. And then finally this one, Descendants, swap image. Again, I want a disjointed rollover. So now it seems to know that I want to do the big image and swap out the big image with my Descendants 500 by 300. Okay, if I want to, oopsie, what happened there? It's missing something. Let's scroll down. That's good. That's good that that happened. Let's make sure these are all good. Okay, let's do, whoa. This one is doing something weird. I don't see it there. I must have done something wrong. So it was weird that it started with big image. So big image, browse, Descendants, 500 by 300. Okay. All right, now it's definitely hooked in there. So let's go ahead and scrub through all these. I'm going to click on each one to make sure everything's golden, and then we'll go ahead and save it. See if they all do their thing. There's the Descendants, there's Sublime, there's Jawbreaker. We didn't do minor threat. We did the minor threat, the swap image, but not a disjointed rollover. So everything's good. Now, first of all, let's go ahead and make it give us the finger. That's an important thing to know, so that they'll look like links. They're sort of functioning as links because they're, loading up other content. So I can make them look like links, especially if I wanted to have you click to do if I want to load up the image with a click, I should tell people that it's a link, and that's really easy. In Dreamweaver, to tell people something's a link, all you have to do is tell the browser it's a link, and then the browser will indicate that to the user. So to do that, we use what we did last time when we did our links for words. We just go to our link field. I have my image selected, and in this case, since I don't actually have a link for it, all I do is put in the hashtag. If I put in the hashtag for all these guys, that little finger will come up automatically. So, because what it's doing when I do that is it is writing some code. It's putting a link around that image, and so right here is my linking element. So it starts with an A, because remember A's mean a link. So the browser reads that, oh, there's a link there. The link doesn't really go to anything. It's just filled in with this hashtag, this pound sign. And then the link ends at the end of the image, wherever that is. Right here. It's stuck right here. There's the end of the image before the word Descendants. Okay, so that's what will give us the finger when we preview it next time. All right, last step. We've done a rollover, swap image rollover, a swap image disjointed rollover, and now we're going to add some CSS-based rollovers using filters. And these are super easy. These are probably the easiest things to do. I'm going to put this back into my live view because that's how we see our CSS working. And now notice also I get the finger when I roll over these things. And now we don't need to, nothing's going to change on our HTML page for these. This is all CSS based. The images are already on the page. All we need to do is go to our style sheet. And I'm going to put this in code view for a minute. So there's our style sheet. It's pretty straightforward. There's only 4 different styles on it. All right. And some of them are what you see I use for everything. It's sort of nulling out the margins and setting the width and the height to the body to 100%, that sort of thing. Okay, so on Canvas, there's a link to W3 Schools and the filters. So it goes to this page right here, which tells you all about Css Filter Property and gives you, and you can try any one of these if you want. So You can hit the little play it button, or you can do the try it yourself. So apply a blurred background image. Try it yourself. So you see that background image is blurred, and it's because over here they have this blur filter, and it's set to 35 pixels. If you want, you can say, oh, I wonder what it would look like at 2 pixels, and hit run. And the interesting thing about this site is they do all the CSS internally, so it's all in the head of the page. So the different rules and the selectors are all up here in the head. So the user won't see them, but they'll still work on the page. It's not an external style sheet, it's an internal style. There's no problem with doing that. You might have done it by accident already. If you forget to attach something to your style sheet, it will go in here by default. But they do it this way so you can actually see the CSS and modify it, and then hit the run button and see what happens. Okay. So for us, it's really straightforward to use one of these. So if I wanted to use brightness, I can select this rule, say copy, copying it to my clipboard, come back over to Dreamweaver, go to the next line of my style sheet after the curly brace from the last rule, and put it in there. And hit the little fresh button. I don't even need this behaviors thing anymore. Okay, this is not a behavior. This is actually just CSS. All right, so it says filter brightness 200, and it's called IMG. And this would change every image. So if I come back here and look at my live view, look how bright everything is. It looks hideous. Because that's what my selector is, right? I don't want that as my selector. I can just call it something else, I'll make it into a class so I can apply it to anything, and I'll call it my brightness. Or I could even just call it brightness, and that would probably work too. But notice now it's not doing anything, right? Because I haven't actually applied it to anything yet. Before, it affected all the images because it was an element selector. So every image it saw, if there was an image on the page, it said, oh, I need to apply this to that image. Now the selector says my brightness. I'm going to make this shorter. I'm going to just call it my bright. But watch, let's do Jawbreaker. Let's take Jawbreaker, and if we click on the image, we get this little blue bar at the top, and it shows us the current ID. But I'm going to hit this little plus, and I'm going to add a class to it. And the class I'm going to add is my bright. I'm going to start to type it in, and it'll totally code in us. And look what happened. It got all bright, just that one. Let's see if we do instead of 200%, like 50%. Then it's all dark. So how is this going to work for us as a rollover? Well, we're going to need a hover state for this, won't we? We have the initial state. So to do this, you have to define the initial state. And actually, I'll put the brightness at 100%, now that you know how that works. And then I'm going to take this whole thing. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go to line 52. That's my next open line. And I'm going to do paste. All right, so right now I have the two of the exact same rule. But what I'm going to do with my bright is just make this one a pseudo class. I'm going to put a colon, and I'm going to write hover. And then I'm going to change this value, because right now they're the same. And actually, you know what? Let's make this 100%. We'll make it 200% for now, just so you can see the difference. So when I roll over Jawbreaker, is this one I applied my bright to? I can't remember. Yes. When I roll over Jawbreaker, it gets super bright. Now that's not exactly what I want to happen. What I probably would prefer happening is that it starts out a little dark, maybe 70%, and then when I roll over it, it turns to its natural 100% state. There we go. And this is a class. And remember, the thing about a class is that you make something a class because you might want to use it more than once. So let's do that. Now that I have a class and I have a pseudo class that, I have the same selector, my bright, let's go to Sublime and attach my bright. So dot my bright, and it does it. Now look, it just jumped right in what we wanted to do. So that's how easy it is. You just need to set the initial state of it with the class, and then set the hover state. So you would have the same class, the colon, and hover, and then a different value, obviously. But the same filter, the same value, just a different, or same filter, just a different value. Let's do one more to descendants. So let's look for another filter that might work here. So back to Google Chrome. How about, that's a black and white image, so that takes a lot of the color ones off the table. And I don't want to do a drop shadow because it wouldn't look very good in that grid. And the grayscale, there's no color in it again. I don't know how that would work. And let's do invert, because we can invert black and white. So let's take this one, say copy, and go over to Dreamweaver. And again, we'll hit, so look, they all inverted once again. I'm glad this is doing this because this should be teaching you all about selectors. So again, this selector is IMG, which means any image on the page that's, every image on the page is put into HTML with that tag. So it's seeing that tag and it's inverting all of them. Again, we don't want that as a selector. I can change it here, I can change it here. It doesn't matter where I change it. You're going to see it change up here as soon as I go ahead and change it here, because this is the styles, right? These are all the selectors. And this is the selector I'm changing. And I'm just going to call this like dot invert it. Okay? Now it's not affecting anything because nothing has this inverted class applied to it. All right. This one's a little weird because I think you can, this might be one where I probably should have checked it in W3 schools. But let's apply it to here and then we'll figure it out from there. So we're going to click on the descendants one, hit the plus, and type in dot in invert it. And look, it inverted, so I know that's working. So yay, let's see what happens if I put 0% in here. All right, it's back to normal. So that's a huge plus. I know it's going to work. I know how the values are correct. So copy. We will hit return. So we're on line 58 and paste that again. Now clearly we need to change the selector to make it a pseudo class. So invert it, colon, hover. Okay, and the value. So now the value should be, let's do 100%, not 10%, 100%. So it's going to invert it 100%. So the white should be black and the black should be white. Okay, now it won't work. Some of these won't work here, oddly, and sometimes you got to click in here. There we go, now it's working. Dreamweaver's a little weird. It made me click in this window before it would start to work, but now it's working. And just to double check, this is probably a good time to save everything. So save, yes. All right, from the top, there's our invert. It's doing two things. It's doing the disjointed rollover with JavaScript using the behaviors window, and it's got our CSS-based rollover to apply that filter that is inverting it. This one also has two things happening, and this has two things happening. So this is the one that has the swap image done with the behaviors panel. There is a way to swap the colors if I just wanted to swap the colors with the filter. So I tend to just use the CSS filters for all the Mousovers just because they're so clean and easy and they don't need to use JavaScript or anything like that. All right, cool. So that's what you should do with your homework. Affect all four buttons this way. Go ahead and do the disjointed swap image for all four of these and use at least two different CSS selectors to change the thumbnail on Mouseover, and do at least one swap image rollover. You can only do minor threat because, again, that's the only image that I included in your image folder, unless you wanted to make up your own 115 by 115 pixel image. But I would just go ahead and do minor threat. Okay, because all the images that you have are in your local root folder, and by the way, there's already your CSS external style sheet in there. That's what I was working on. All right, if you have any questions, let me know, and I will try to answer them as soon as I can. Have fun with Mousovers.